Hey, this video is totally impromptu. I did not get ready before this video, and I do realize I'm filming um, vertically instead of horizontally. I apologize, I know that's a sin. Um, but this is the only way I can set it up because I'm just filming with my phone right now. I just wanted to update you guys for a couple reasons. One, I feel really bad about not updating you guys. But that doesn't mean that I have to update you guys. Of course I know this. But I feel like I should. Because I don't know when, if ever, I'm going to come back. I would love to. Um, my life has been crazy right now. I just got out of the hospital. I was in there for 12 days. And it was I was in there for a couple reasons. I went in initially for my mental health. But the funny thing is, so if anybody knows anything about my health, I'm chronically ill, and disabled. So the funny thing about my health is when one issue pops up, a lot of others follow. So this video is going to be so long. My god. It's already a minute and a half. Anyway. So I went in for my mental health. So I went to the emergency room. I was in there for, I think, 5 hours. It was really, really busy. So they stuck me on a stretcher in the hallway, right outside of the triage room. So I was very overwhelmed, not very good for people with autism, or any mental health. I mean, anyway, just not very good. I wish we could change the way that happens. So I was in the ER for 5 hours, and then a couple things happened. So they took me out of my clothes. I got put into paper scrubs, the whole 9 yards, like no laces, no drawstrings. They took my scrunchie, which I was really mad about because my hair got very matted. Yeah, take your stuff, Then they had I don't really know who this was. I think it was a counselor. I'm not sure. But a nurse came up to me and handed me an iPad. I don't know who this was. There was a man on the other side of the iPad asking me questions. So I was answering them in the middle of the hallway, like very serious, like, mental health related questions. That felt a little weird, answering it in front of, like, a ton of other patients. Very weird. So, because I didn't have access to my asthma medication, I don't know if anybody already knows this. I might have mentioned it before. Honestly, I forget. I have asthma, and it's really serious for me. I have, like, chronic severe asthma. Because I didn't have access to my asthma medication, I needed to go up to the watch nurse, and ask for an inhaler. And I, for some reason, forgot that it's going to take a really long time to get my medication. So, like, 3 hours later, I get my inhaler, and I'm not feeling really great. And then one of the psych nurses comes down, and she transfers me to the psych ward. And, like, I get a tour and everything. They do, like, paperwork, yada yada yada. I get my room. I'm asleep for 3 hours, and then I wake up having, like, one of the worst asthma attacks I've ever had in my life. So I drag myself down to the nurse's station in the psych ward, and I'm telling them, like, I'm having an asthma attack. They try to say it's anxiety, which makes sense. I'm in the psych ward. And I'm trying to tell them, meanwhile I can't breathe, that, no, I have asthma, this is an asthma attack. And so they call a rapid response, and the elevator to the psych ward is broken. So just keep that in mind. Sorry, this video is going to be so long. I apologize. So the elevator to the psych ward is broken. So they call a rapid response, and the respiratory team has to, like, run up the stairs. They got there very fast. Very, very fast. Maybe 2 minutes after they call the rapid response, which is, I'm so grateful for. And so they were taking my vitals. They had to put me on oxygen at that point. But because I was in the psych ward, they only had, like, some half-full oxygen tanks. Really old ones. So they ran over, got me the oxygen tank from the psych ward. Hooked me up to that immediately. I think they gave me a nebulizer with albuterol at that point, which it's a emergency medication to, like, open your lungs. And a nebulizer is just, like, the way that it delivers the medicine. It just, like, aerosolizes the liquid medicine, if that makes sense. So I'm sitting there, tons of nurses and doctors around me, like, with the psych nurse is, like, rubbing my back, telling me she's never dealt with anything like this before. She's, like, scared for me. And so they have to go get me a wheelchair because I cannot walk. And the elevator is broken. So, they go get me a wheelchair. I don't really remember much at this point because I'm literally just trying to breathe. They get me a wheelchair and they wheel me through the maternity ward. But I'm really, really lucky that this happened because the psych nurses told me if I was aggressive towards anybody else, like hostile, unpredictable, they would not have wheeled me through the maternity ward, and that's the only way to get out of the psych ward, without, like, having to go down the stairs, and I was in a wheelchair. So, I don't know what they would have done in that case. Maybe, like, pick up the wheelchair with me in it and bring it down the stairs, but that's really heavy. I think the nurses could handle it, but that's ridiculous. That's besides the point. So they wheel me through the maternity ward, and, they bring me downstairs, to, like, an inpatient room in the medical ward, and I'm sitting there, like, unable to breathe and unable to talk, getting asked a bunch of questions by nurses. We had to do, like, yes or no, questions, because I could only, like, shake my head and nod, because I could not talk, because I couldn't breathe. I'm still hooked up to oxygen at this point. They had done the nebulizer treatment, and it didn't do anything. I was coughing a lot, because I was trying to breathe. And I think it was, like, 5 hours before I got treatment. I had gotten a nebulizer before, but it wasn't helping. And I was on oxygen, and it was helping a little, but not enough. So then they tried to put an IV in me, and there's a couple problems with that. No one can ever get an IV in me. Okay, trigger warning, I'm going to show a bruise. It's not really bad right now. But trigger warning, look away if you don't like bruises, and if you don't like talking about needles. I'm going to be talking about needles for a while. Okay, so this is, like, one of my old bruises from one of the IVs. It's doing a lot better now. But, so they tried in this arm first. They tried a bunch of places. Didn't work. They tried in this arm. It worked for a little bit. But I'll get into that. So they had 5 people each try twice on me to get an IV. None of them worked. But we did have one IV that worked for a little while. So I had a saline drip, and IV steroids for the asthma. to try to get it under control. They did try for IV antibiotics, but at that point my IV had failed. So from that point, I was in that room for I think 2 days, and then I got taken to get a CAT scan, which was very interesting. It was my first ever CAT scan, and you need an IV for that. So they had a really old nurse who'd been there for a while try in this arm, and it worked for a little bit, so that's good. So as soon as the IV worked, we had to go do a CAT scan of my chest cavity. Oh, I forgot to mention they did a portable x-ray first, before this, when I was still in the room. It had to be portable because I could not get to the lab to do, like, a x-ray in the actual lab. So they do the CAT scan. It's very weird. If anybody's had a CAT scan, you know what I'm talking about. The reason I have to have an IV is because they have to inject, like, a medication that makes it so that it's easier to see the results in the CAT scan itself. And one of them, she did a cold and a hot one. The hot one makes it feel like you're peeing. Like, she told me this, like, going in, that it makes you feel like you're peeing, and I was like, no, it's fine, totally fine, because she did the cold one first, and I was like, yeah, this is good, and then she's like, okay, you're gonna feel like you're peeing, and I was like, that's weird, and I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. It does happen. It does feel like you're peeing on the table. It just kind of feels warm down there, and wet, so it does feel like you're peeing. I promise you're not, and even if you did pee, I feel like that's, like, they've seen it before, you know? So we do the CAT scan. I'm wheeled down in a wheelchair to the CAT scan and wheeled back to my medical room. And then at that point, they transfer me to the ICU. And I'm in the ICU for 2 or 3 days. I can't really remember because I was on a lot of medication, which altered my state of consciousness, and I can't breathe. And on top of that, we found out that I have a lot of cardiac issues, which were exacerbated by this. So... So I get to the ICU, and they get me a room, and they get me all hooked up. In the ICU, you have, like, constant vitals, as opposed to someone coming in, the nurse coming in and taking your vitals at a set time. It is taking your vitals constantly. So I had, like, a pulse oximeter. It was, like, a sticker version. I had a constant, blood pressure, cuff. They had mine set to every hour because I was having a lot of blood pressure issues. Which I can go into that if people want to know about the blood pressure issues, which I will probably end up discussing in a bit. So I had the blood pressure cuff, the pulse oximeter, heart monitor, so like a bunch of stickers with, what's the word I want? I forget the word I want. So it's just, wow, okay. It's just tracking my heart rate. Yeah. I think that's it. No, I had my drip saline at that point too. But it was in the ICU where I had to start taking my IV out because it was, hurting, which it's not supposed to hurt. It's gonna hurt when it, like, gets inserted, but it's not supposed to hurt when they, administer the medication. So it was hurting, so we had to take it out. And then they couldn't get another IV in me, and so I asked not to get another IV because it was causing me a lot of pain and stress. So I was in the ICU. They had to do a heart echo, so like an ultrasound of my heart. But they couldn't see a big portion of my heart. And so at this point we realized that, so what happened was, I had, in plain terms, I had an asthma attack, which led to, obviously, I had an asthma attack, I knew this, which led to, so in your lungs, there are little pockets of air, like, surrounding your lungs, and, like, that's normal, it's supposed to be there in everyone. Mine, a couple of mine had burst, and the air traveled out of my lungs into my chest cavity, on this side. And so this is the side that my heart is at. So it was also covering an artery of my heart, which is contributing to my cardiac issues at this point. It's since gone away, but before you could see the bubble and, like, feel it. So we were trying to figure out, like, what is going on with my heart. And they couldn't see anything because the air was blocking the ultrasound. I was looking at it and you couldn't really see anything. It's very weird to see your heart beating in real time, by the way. So they could see the left side of my heart, but not the right, I think. So then they sent the cardiologist down, and he does an EKG, and they just find tachycardia, which is just fast heart rate, which we've known that I've had for, like, my whole life, and the asthma medication causes tachycardia, so it's not a huge issue, but it is still an issue. And my heartbeat was irregular, but that's kind of expected at this point. This video is going to be so long. I keep saying that. I apologize, honestly. What was I saying? The EKG. So, yeah. Then they do some orthostatic, vitals on me. So that's just taking your blood pressure, laying flat, and then when you sit up, and then when you stand. And so really what they're testing for there is POTS, polyorthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And I had my orthostatics done a couple times while I was in the hospital, and they were kind of all over the place. So we're not sure at this point if I have POTS or not. I'm going to need more testing for that. But I do think that's pretty likely. So that's fun. So my cardiac issues are not fully resolved, but I'm doing a lot better because the air pocket has gone away, if that makes sense. So from the ICU, I get transferred back to the room that I was in before for a couple days. The pulmonologist visits me, and they switch me to prednisone, which is an oral steroid, as opposed to the IV one I was taking, because my IVs didn't work, and I asked them not to do another one. And at this point, the arm that my IV was in, which is this one, it's still healing from my IV. I could not extend it at all. So my arm had to be like this the whole time, and it was causing me severe pain. Like, not treatable by pain meds. I could not extend it at all, and just moving my fingers hurt. And it was keeping me up at night, the pain. So that's part of the reason I was like, no more IVs, because this is ridiculous. And it's still hurting me right now. I can almost fully extend it, but it still hurts. And it's still healing. So I get transferred back to my old room. The pulmonologist comes. We're switching medications. I get a nebulizer treatment every 4 hours. They do some blood tests. I wish I had them for you right now, but I actually had to submit them to Social Security, and I'm waiting to get them back. But my blood tests were all over the place, and it indicated, that I couldn't breathe, obviously. But also, I have a chronic condition called Alport syndrome. It's genetic. It's a mutation on collagen, mainly affecting the kidneys. And so my blood tests were consistent with that. So I need to see a nephrologist and make sure that my kidneys are functioning, but I'm fairly certain they are not. At some point, I may end up needing dialysis, and later down the road, I might need a kidney transplant. But we'll just see. We'll see how that goes. What else? So from that point, I'm just kind of waiting for a bed to open back up at the psych ward. It had been 6 days since I left the psych ward at this point. So the crisis response team comes down and she asks me a bunch of questions. She was very rude. And they're just trying to figure out if staying in that hospital to the psych ward there is the right place for me. And I didn't want to go anywhere else because the other places in the area are far worse. So I was kind of answering my questions to lean towards staying at that same hospital, just in the psych ward there. So they leave, and they gather up my things a couple minutes later, and I'm wheeled back up to the psych ward, where I'm, admitted, so, going through the whole process again. It's nighttime at this point, too, and I want to preface by saying this whole point, so I have migraines, but a lot of the doctors and nurses didn't know about migraines, so they were giving me Tylenol, which causes worse migraines, and my migraines come with vertigo and auras, so I was dealing with a lot of vertigo, so they were giving me, anti-nausea meds, motion sickness meds, and I was on a lot of medication at this point. I should have stayed in the medical ward, because for the first, 3 days of being in the psych ward, I was completely out of it, and, not able to participate in any of the stuff. So I think I should have stayed in the medical ward, but the doctors were trying to push me out. That's besides the point. So I'm in the psych ward, it's nighttime, so I'm getting, adjusted. I have a roommate. I loved my roommate, she was great. I was really sad when she got discharged before me. And this is my first time ever being in the psych ward, so I was really scared. And all of the other patients there had been multiple times, and had been to this specific one. So they all kind of knew what was happening, but I had no idea, and nobody was really explaining anything to me. So I wake up the next morning because the counselors came in and woke me up and, opened the blinds and stuff. And I had no idea what I was supposed to do. For the first couple days, I just kind of stayed in my room until somebody told me to do whatever, because I had no idea what I was supposed to do. And when I asked my roommate, she just said to do whatever, but I, didn't believe that. But that is true, you kind of just do whatever you want, within reason. So the schedule kind of just went you wake up at 7:30, you get your vitals taken every morning, and mine were always way out of whack because, chronically ill, and on a ton of meds that affect it. And, then breakfast was at 8, you would fill out a menu then for the whole day, and then the following breakfast the next day. And then there was a morning meeting, and then from there you would just kind of have group therapy. It wasn't really therapy. It was mostly like coloring pages and like like yoga. So that wasn't really helpful for me, but whatever. I got very lucky the first couple days that I was there. The psychiatrist was out. The psychiatrist was absolutely horrible. One of the worst doctors I have ever met in my life, and I don't say that lightly. I'm really used to having doctors that are dismissive of my issues, and this was the worst doctor I've ever encountered. All of the patients and staff hate him. He has multiple complaints, but he still has his job because he's the only one in the area, and he runs all of the psych hospitals in the area. So I was very lucky the first couple days he wasn't there, and the nurse practitioner was taking care for me. So they put me on Lexapro, which is an antidepressant and used to treat like anxiety, OCD, stuff like that. So I got very lucky. She put me on Lexapro. So yeah. I kind of just like took my meds, went to my doctor's appointments, like went to groups, talked to other patients. It's very boring in there, but I honestly loved it. The autism loves the schedule, so I loved that. Yeah. I'm trying to think what else I wanted to say. Oh, I can show you this. This is my incentive spirometer. I have to use it to exercise my lungs. As much as possible. They just told me as much as possible, so that's what I do. I don't know. Oh, the psychiatrist was bad because he threatened to take a lot of patients to court, if they wanted to get discharged. He made a lot of people cry. He was very dismissive, very rude. He tried to take me off my asthma medication because he didn't understand why I was on it. And so I fought him very heavily on that because I didn't want to die. And then he threatens to, like, mess with people's medication. Like, with another patient I was talking, he was trying to take her off a medication that she's been on for years that she likes and switch her to something else that has an interaction with her medication. And he was trying to tell her that that's not true, and then printed off a packet about the medication wherein it clearly states that it's an interaction that can cause death, and you cannot refuse to see him. That's not an option. You have to see him, and you only see him for about 30 seconds a day. So really what I just did was let him talk his bullshit, really. He's very clearly mentally ill. He definitely has a personality disorder. Not that I want to diagnose people, because that's not my job. But he definitely does. So I just used that to my advantage. Let him talk. Let him make this about him. And get out of there. I was very lucky. He was trying to get me to go to partial, which is just like group therapy during the day and then you go home. And I told him I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's helpful. And the nurse teams that saw me basically agreed. Because that's what I said. So the first day that I went there, they had a social worker come up and help me apply for disability, because I am disabled. I've been on disability leave from my work for a couple months now. It's going to last until September, unless me and my doctors decide that it's time to go back earlier. And I'm going to need a lot of accommodations when I go back to work. I'm really upset about it, but it's what I need. I can't really do the things that I like to do. It's hard. But I think accommodations are what I need, and That's just how it's going to be. It's really hard to lose the ability to do things that you once did and enjoyed. Like, I can't really lift weights anymore. I'm hoping maybe if I see a physical therapist, I can get back to that. But right now, my heart and my lungs just can't take it. And I can't go in high altitudes, otherwise the remaining air in my lungs could explode. I forgot to mention that the air collapsed my lungs. So my lungs are really weak and vulnerable right now. So I can't go in high altitudes, which means that I can't hike, which is really important to me. So I'm struggling with that. I also already live at a pretty high altitude, so it's a lot of additional stress on my body. My blood pressure issues are way out of whack. I'm a fall risk constantly. My migraines are just as bad as they always have been. Which, if any of you have migraines, you know just how bad it is. It is not just a headache, it is a neurological condition. So yeah. I'm also still having absence seizures, which we can't really medicate right now because my body, it can't take that medication. I also can't medicate the migraines because it interacts with my medications, and it's also, my kidneys can't filter out that medication, so it would like speed up kidney failure. So I'm really struggling. I'm getting my healthcare, because I went to the hospital, my healthcare now realizes that I am actually disabled and chronically ill. So I'm getting assigned a kind of like a personal assistant, but they also navigate the healthcare system, which is really important because America has an insane healthcare system. Purposefully difficult. So I should hear back about that on May 1st. And we'll kind of see how that goes. Me and my doctors are all trying to find anyone who can give me an official ADHD and autism diagnosis. But right now there is absolutely no one in my entire area who can diagnose those things. Even in the hospital, they told me they don't do that. So it's really tough. And then there are going to be a lot of barriers, even if I find someone who can do that. So we're going to see how that goes. But all of my doctors agree that I do have ADHD and autism. It's just a matter of getting the official diagnosis. Yeah, so I have a psychiatrist now who's, in charge of my meds. So I'm constantly kind of switching around meds. It's very tiring. That's one of the reasons that I'm not working right now, just because it's very serious. And I don't want anything to happen to me while I'm at work. Along with all of my other conditions. Yeah. It's really tough. And I'm dealing with a lot. But I really want to get back to streaming. I'm just not sure how I would do that at this point. Honestly, I can't. It's a struggle just to take care of myself at this point, and my entire day is spent dealing with my health. When I do eventually get back to streaming, which is what me and my doctors are working towards, it'll probably look a little different. But we'll just see. The first couple times I do it, I think are just going to be like test runs. But I miss all of you so much, and I feel so much immense guilt for not streaming at the moment, and not being active on Twitch and social media as a whole. I want to watch your streams. I do. But the anxiety that it causes me is overwhelming. Even with medication and coping skills, it's overwhelming to me, and it makes it not enjoyable anymore. Just because I feel like I have convinced myself that all of you hate me, which cannot be true. I mean, some of you could hate me. But that's true of, like, anyone. But it's not true that all of you hate me. I guess it could be, but even so, I am convinced if I go back, it'll be a nightmare. I'm convinced that I have lost all of my hard work. It honestly scares me just to open Twitch again and see, like, the numbers go down. And honestly, I'm scared, like, if I make, this will never be an issue, but if I make too much money off Twitch, I will lose my healthcare. I will lose my disability, but I haven't been approved for that yet. It takes many, many years, and I will likely have to keep reapplying, because it's a nightmare, just like healthcare. I will lose all of my benefits that I rely on to survive. It's tough. It's a balancing act, and I haven't got the balance yet. But I want to, and I think the first step when I'm ready, which is nowhere near, I have to focus on, like, my physical health first. But I think the first step, as far as streaming goes, whenever I'm ready, is just to get back on your guys' streams and see how that is. It's tough because I don't want the focus to be on me and other people's streams. That's, I think, out of pocket. Very rude. But I worry so much about how I am perceived by others, that I was masking so much while streaming, and it's so tiring. If anybody has autism, or even ADHD, or possibly, like, anxiety, you know how tiring it is to mask. And I'm really working on not masking as much, but it's very hard, because it's so ingrained in myself. Like, growing up, I was very heavily bullied for being autistic, but we didn't know that. You know, I was just weird, but that's not the case. Well, I am weird, but but it was the autism doing that. So it's really hard. I have a lot of things that I need to work on, but I also desperately want to get back to streaming. I enjoy it. It makes my life feel fulfilled, which is huge. But I have a lot of things going on, and I'm having some financial issues, obviously, because I can't work. And my setup is kind of all over the place. I've been moving around in different locations, trying to find a stable place to live. So it's tough. Basically, that's what I keep getting back to. So what I really need from you guys is to help me get this video out there to anyone who may have any questions about what's going on with me, or my channel, or any of my platforms, because I just can't do that right now. This video is so long, it'll probably end up being uploaded to YouTube. But I really need your guys' help in telling people what's going on, because I just can't blast it to every platform. I just can't do that at the moment. So if anybody asks anything, and you've seen this video, you can just give them, like, the TLDR of it. And really, that's it. And if you guys have any questions about anything, really, I'm more than happy to answer, And don't be afraid about like asking the wrong thing. Because if you do, I can tell you that I don't want to answer that. Like, that's totally fine. And it's nothing against you. It's just whatever I feel comfortable answering. And I want people to know that this, like, if you find yourself in a similar situation, I want you to know it's okay to seek help. It's really scary. It's scary. But it's not going to be as bad as you think, and you will get the resources that you need out of it, which are, at least in America, incredibly difficult to get, and you often have to jump through hoops. Like, I had to go to the hospital in order for me to get help, to get the resources that I need, which is insane. So that's really it. Again, if you have any questions, just ask me. Sweet. This is so long. I'm so sorry. Bye.